And the reality is, as pastors and as spiritual leaders, we have the responsibility of, as best we can, from a human perspective, creating an environment where parents can know that their children are safe in the children's department, and their teens are safe in the teen department, and adults are safe when they come together to worship and to fellowship. And so I think we have a moral responsibility, and we have a tremendous opportunity to help create a safe environment where God's people can gather and do what Christians do.
Good morning. Come on in. Remember Sue? Okay,
Sid, hey girl, come here. Let's go. Hey, my wife, she just texted me and said that she needed me to pick up Sydney, and so...
Hi, Sue.
Oh, hi, Carrie.
Hi, I'm here to pick Sydney up.
Well, your husband picked her up. He said you texted him and had an emergency.
What? He's not supposed to have her.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
A child taken by someone who should not be with her, in a way that seems completely normal, in a church. What if it were your church, or your child? What if you were that volunteer?
This kind of scenario is only one in the full spectrum of safety and security concerns our ministries face today. Medical emergencies, theft, disruptive persons, and even violent incidents are all situations today's churches need to plan and prepare for.
Communities and congregations expect their places of worship to be sanctuaries in the midst of a busy and sometimes unpredictable world. And churches have a special responsibility to protect their children, their worship experience, and their ministries. The best way to do that is to prepare.
Developing and implementing a church safety and security program may seem like a daunting task and even a little intimidating, but it's really just a series of manageable steps that build on resources you may already have in your church. So let's get started.
The first and most important step is recognizing the need for a church safety and security program, and that may require a shift in mindset.
I would say one of the challenges with many churches is they have the "it can't happen here" mentality. They don't really believe that certain incidents can occur at their place of worship.
Sometimes it takes an actual emergency to change that mindset.
I've been preaching on a Sunday morning when a woman dropped to the floor with a heart attack. You know, medical emergency right in the middle of the service. I've been preaching on a Sunday morning when a total stranger walked up on the platform and interrupted the entire service.
The most common emergencies in a church tend to be medical situations, but we're all aware that churches have been targets of violence as well.
Though the most extreme cases are very rare, other challenges to safety are not, partly because of the nature of a church.
That's the characteristic of the church, and so we invite everyone to come. Well, everyone comes, and they come with their problems, they come with their brokenness, they come hurting, and that they're often people who just don't have the coping skills to deal with the pressures of life. And so the church is just ripe with the opportunity.
It's a reality that churches often work with limited resources, but that doesn't have to be a roadblock to starting an effective safety and security program.
If there was one thing that I could tell every senior leader at churches when it comes to safety and security, is that it doesn't have to be something expensive. You don't have to spend a lot of money to start a safety and security program.
What should a safety and security program cover? The details may vary depending on the size of your church and the makeup of your congregation. A successful program covers three main areas.
Protect the children through careful screening, good supervision, and effective check-in and check-out procedures. Protect the worship experience, the gathering, the giving, and the leaders. Protect the ministries, the missions, the daily operations, and integrity or reputation of your church.
That covers a lot of areas and activities, but remember, you don't have to do everything at once. It's important in starting, though, that the church leaders support this work, especially the pastor.
What's important to the pastor often has that trickle-down effect and becomes important to the congregation. He's the primary spokesman for that particular fellowship. He's the one who sets the vision and the direction.
It may be easier than you think to get the planning process started, and a pastor or other leader doesn't have to do it alone. Sometimes asking a simple question is all it takes.
It was like overnight. It changed the whole atmosphere simply because I said, is there anybody out there that has any interest or has any expertise in these areas that we could begin to draw on as a congregation?
You'd be amazed just by asking the question if they'd be willing to use their gifts and talents to help the ministry, how actually enthusiastic people would be.
We have people on our team that will tell us, I was looking for a place to serve. I've got a military background or I've got law enforcement background and I wanted to serve someplace in the church. This is exactly what I was looking for.
Everyone has a different calling in ministry, and I feel that protection is mine.
I didn't have to come up with all the answers. There were people who were trained, who knew what to do, and I could just be their cheerleader.
We're going to need EMTs and medical people.
At an early stage in the process, it helps to identify one person who will act as the safety and security lead or main point of contact in your church. That person can help lead the team in identifying all the possible situations the program should address.
Every church is different, so as you do this, it's important to keep in mind the character, priorities, and specific ministries of your church.
Are you a church that primarily caters to seekers or new people coming into the church? Are you a missions-oriented church where you spend a great deal of your time sending people all around the globe, populating the mission fields? Are you a youth-oriented church? All these represent very different challenges within that mosaic that makes up a church.
You should also give some thought to who attends your church and whether anyone might be a target of some kind.
You might, for instance, have a high-profile person that has a political position, and maybe he takes a political stance outside the church. Well, if someone is looking to do harm to him, they don't care whether he's at the church or not.
These may not always be comfortable things to think and talk about, especially in the context of your church. But a special kind of balance is needed between faith and responsibility.
Use strong faith and be prayerful as if everything relies on God. But we also think you need to prepare and to plan as if everything relies upon you. And that's the winning combination.
As the team is formed and they begin to do their work, it's important everyone understands there are 3 key factors necessary for an effective safety and security program. The 3 C's: coordinated, consistent, and communicated.
They have to be coordinated. And what I mean by that is, if I am tasked with putting together a safety and security policy, and I'm the only one that does it, and I don't ask for input from you or from the lay team or the pastoral team, probably not going to be very successful.
It has to be consistent, so there's not any confusion about what I'm supposed to do.
That doesn't mean you can't, make different decisions at times based upon circumstances. But on paper and in doctrine, it has to be consistent. And then the final one, which is what we see, probably one of the biggest failings, is the lack of communication. It's got to be communicated.
It doesn't do any good to have a policy and procedure manual and it gets thrown up on a shelf someplace. It's got to be communicated. People have to know that it's there.
We like to say that we want people to respond. We don't want people to react. Responding implies that there's a plan in place. Reacting implies that no one understands what to do next.
Coordinated, consistent, communicated. Keeping those factors in mind, let's take a look at some of the situations a church safety and security program should address.
One of the most compelling reasons to develop a church safety and security program is the need to protect your children. Ironically, the fact that we think of churches as sanctuaries can actually make them less safe.
In our churches, we want to be trusting, not suspicious. We want open and welcome places, not fortresses. We don't want to unnecessarily pry into someone else's private life either. But those factors can set up the very kind of situation where a child is kidnapped by an ex-spouse or partner.
In some cases, a church may unintentionally provide an opportunity for a child abduction. For example, a woman may have moved out of her home and kept her new location secret. An estranged husband or boyfriend may no longer know where they live, but he most likely knows where they go to church.
And despite any family trauma that may have happened, the child may be very happy to see him.
How do you prevent this kind of situation? You should have a standard form on file with written instructions for the care of every child who will be left with your church staff or volunteers. It should be clear who has permission to pick up the child, and your staff should know who that is.
It can be as simple as having a sign-in, sign-out sheet.
It could be a sticker, it can be a bracelet, it can be a sticker on the back that mom and dad has to come in with.
And if everything doesn't match up, we know to ask some questions.
You have to have something to make sure that that child is leaving with the right person, period. And a lot of times that's volunteers, so you need staff oversight. You need that staff person their job is to make sure that the volunteers are doing their job.
The type of check-in, check-out procedure that makes sense will vary based on the size and nature of your congregation. The one thing that won't vary is the importance of having one.
There's another aspect to protecting children that can't be ignored, even though it's unpleasant to think about. A church is a place where an adult can build a relationship of trust with a child. It's one of the few places it wouldn't be considered odd for a non-parent or guardian to be close to a child.
Your pedophiles, your child molesters don't walk into church with a sign around their neck saying, "I'm a bad guy, I'm a pedophile, and I'm looking for a situation." They're gonna walk in and fit in better than anybody else that you have.
That's why screening child care workers is so critical, and it should be rigorous.
We are required to do background checks.
Background checks should be the norm. References are important, and the interview process should be handled with the safety and security of children as the highest concern.
You can think of the main elements of your child's safety policies and procedures as check-in, check-out, and check-up. At check-in, make sure you have a record of who drops off the child. At check-out, make sure the children are picked up by the people who have the authority to do so.
And check up thoroughly on anyone who will be around your children.
One of the most common situations where a safety and security program will help is during a medical emergency. If it's something as serious as a heart attack, a quick, coordinated response could actually save someone's life.
The details of the response plan will depend on the size and makeup of your congregation.
I'm going to make a list right now if I can think of 5 or 6 people that we actually have in the congregation.
In a large church, it may be fairly simple to coordinate with medical doctors and EMTs in the congregation to ensure one will be present at every service.
In a small church, that might not be a possibility, but someone should be present at every service who's been trained in first aid and CPR.
Medical procedures can be handled as sophisticated or as simply as needed. I err on the side of simplicity.
The important thing is to ensure there are specific plans for handling medical emergencies, and that at every service there are people in place who know and understand those plans and their responsibilities within them.
We actually train to this scenario.
What happens if we have somebody that gets sick, isn't feeling well?
We talk about having our teams together and we train.
It may not be practical to do full-scale training for this kind of emergency, but everyone should be very clear on their roles and responsibilities, whether or not they actually have medical training.
Your ushers and greeters need to be a big part of what you're doing with your safety and security team, because the usher or greeter is probably going to be the first person that's made aware that there's a problem.
In a large church, the safety and security team members may be in communication via handheld radios, allowing for immediate response. In a small church, it may be more challenging.
Now, if you have them on a radio, that's great. If you can call them real quick on a cell phone, that's fine too. But not everybody has radios. Not all churches have the radios. But certainly if you know that your first responder in a medical situation is always sitting in the same place, in the same service, even if we go through services and we change personnel, they're always right there. That usher has to know, how do I get a hold of that medical person?
The trained first responder can help teach the rest of the team about the kinds of situations they may face and what the appropriate action might be.
So now you start working on those scenarios, and your medical person always has to be the incident commander, if you will, and your ushers and greeters then can help transport the person if that's what you're going to do.
Regardless of the nature of the medical emergency, a pre-coordinated, consistent, and communicated plan with designated first responders will help you deliver the fastest care with the least possible disturbance to others.
And in a serious emergency, the seconds saved through preparation and coordination might literally be the difference between life and death.
We thank you, Lord, for the chance we have to reach out to this community and to show your love and grace and blessing to people all around us. Lord,
I'm part of this community. What about me? You talk about helping all the time. I'm always here.
There are few settings where a threatening situation feels more out of place than in a worship service. but people often seek out our churches and ministries when personal problems and situations are overwhelming.
I'm part of the community.
Your security team should be prepared to handle a disruptive individual in the service. But anticipation and early intervention can often diffuse potentially dangerous situations before they get that far.
It's important to get your ushers and greeters and your parking lot people in, because they're going to be the first ones to see this person. They're going to see somebody who's walking in that they're troubled and they've got some problems.
It's important to know that even in a situation where there's a very real possibility someone will become violent, it's sometimes possible to de-escalate the situation through empathy and active listening.
Is there anything I could help you with? Is this your first time here?
They're upset, they're disgruntled, they're mad at the world. You can see it in their body actions, you can see it in their facial expressions. And as a member of our safety and security team would approach them, you look like you're having problems, can I help you? And they would break down, and it's my wife, my life, my job, my kids, all of the above.
You have to actively listen, and you have to actively watch what they're saying and what they're doing.
And we didn't walk up and say, hey pal, what's your problem? It was, sir, you look like you could need some help.
There's another thing to remember about disruptive or unusual situations during a worship service. Your safety and security team needs to know in advance about anything that's been planned for the service.
Is the pastor going to walk off the stage? Is the pastor going to walk into the audience? Is there someone from the audience that's going to stand up and respond to a question? Is someone going to approach the stage? You need to know everything that's going to happen that day, so if something out of the ordinary happens, you know that that's unintended and that you need to address it.
You may want to agree on a no-go zone, that no one is allowed to occupy unescorted once the service begins.
Thinking through and coordinating with leadership ahead of time how you want to respond to these kinds of disturbances will help ensure the integrity and safety of your worship service.
And disruptive individuals don't just come to church services when your security team is regularly in place.
Jesus wants you to help the poor, right?
They could show up in the office on a weekday looking for benevolence.
You have to make sure that whoever that church receptionist is, or whoever it is the first point of contact, understands what their role or responsibility is.
You know, the pastor's here. I'm sure he'd love to speak with you. Let me just call him, okay? And
We've covered protecting the children and protecting the worship service. A complete safety and security program will cover all of your operations and ministries, from handling tithes and offerings to protecting people who are doing mission work in foreign countries.
Churches vary. Thinking about the culture of your church and all the things it does will help you shape a security plan specific to your organization.
Here are some of the questions you might ask. What kind of natural disasters are common to your location? Who has access to your church and when? Who counts the offering? Is the process monitored and controlled? Are your files and computer data protected? Do you have youth group activities? When are they held and where? Do you have counseling after hours? Do other community groups meet in your facilities? Do you provide services for disadvantaged people? Do you send or sponsor groups on foreign missions? Do you reach out to the homeless? Do you have a summer youth camp? Do you have a prison ministry? What other ministries do you run or support?
One of the greatest risks to today's ministries involves foreign travel. Participants traveling on missions outside the U.S. need to be trained to handle the risks of ministering in foreign countries.
Once you have a full picture of everything your church is involved in, you'll be able to start asking the what-if questions that will help you develop strategies for possible situations in any of these areas.
Actively and purposefully safeguarding your church and ministries demonstrates integrity, inspires confidence, and protects the reputation of your organization.
A safety and security program is most successful when it's designed and implemented as an actual ministry of your church.
A ministry dedicated to safety and security in your church will be accepted more readily, coordinated more fully, and will result in a more positive impact across all your church's functions.
If you're a pastor or a church leader, you don't have to create a safety and security program alone, but you may need to initiate it, and your support can make a significant difference.
They are the leader of the church. If they embrace safety and security, then the rest of their congregation will as well.
There's an expectation on the members that attend that you're doing something to protect me and my family when I come to church.
And we just have the moral responsibility to do everything we can.
It's not difficult, but it does take some leadership on your part to empower others, to trust others, to train others, and to do this together so this beautiful mosaic of church safety and security can become a reality. You can do it, and today is the time to get started.
Your church. It's filled with people and activities that need and deserve your protection.
You can create a safer place to worship and minister.